Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Abhinit Tiwari with us on Audio Gyan. Abhinit is a designer and a programmer who has been building digital products for past 14 years. He's currently heading the design team at Gojek. He founded Leftshift Technologies, where he built products for BookMyShow, Airtel, Citrus, NH7, and many more. Leftshift was then acquired in 2016 by Gojek Indonesia. For those who are not aware of Gojek, it is the Southeast Asia's leading on-demand multi-service tech platform, providing access to a wide range of services including transports, payments, food delivery, logistics, and many more. Abhinit is here with us today to share his insights and learning while building the Asphalt, Gojek's design system. So thank you, Abhinit, for giving your time, and it's a real pleasure to have you on Audio again. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kedar. Hope you're safe in the lockdown.
Yes. In fact, I should tell our listeners that we are recording on 22nd of March, which is like a lockdown for the entire country in India. And it's been quite an experience. And I hope all the listeners are safe. I think it will be live sometime mid-April, but let's see where it goes. I hope. How are things in Jakarta?
Pretty similar, or as we'd say it here, sama-sama.
Mm-hmm.
There are cases here as well, but everything seems to be under control for now. Let's see.
Okay, nice. Good to hear that.
We're all working from home.
Yeah, same here. Cool. So basically, this episode, I wanted to focus on design system. What is design system? How are they built? What are the advantages and stuff like that? And like Asphalt being the biggest, like one of the biggest well-designed design systems in the Southeast Asian market, definitely. I thought, why don't we just understand how it is built, sort of a case study. And to begin, if you can set the context by telling us what is a design system, how is it different from like a brand guidelines or a sticker sheet or any pattern library, front-end framework. There are a lot of these connotations which are associated with it,
Yeah.
but design system independently has its own characteristics as well. So if you can start by that and then walk us through, and then I have follow-up questions of how Asphalt was built.
Sure. So to start off, to call what you're doing a design system, there are three things you should definitely have. Right? First is a library of design patterns, or a pattern library, as you said, which is freely available for use for all developers and designers within the organization. Second, everything in that library, in the design library, should be available in form of code to everyone as well. Right? And lastly, a very thorough documentation of all these design patterns, the what's and whys behind them, and also procedures for other designers and engineers to be able to suggest changes, file bugs, or suggest new components that should be added. So these three things, if you don't have any of these, then you might have a sticker sheet or a pattern library or a front-end framework or any combination of those. But to call it a design system, you need these for sure.
Okay, so three of them to put together only will make a design system.
Yes, and
Okay.
that's just for the sake of definition. Otherwise, if you're a really small team and there is a single designer and a single engineer, let's just imagine the smallest team possible. In that case, yeah, your documentation might not be as thorough because you're getting the information across manually, right? But just by sitting next to that person, so you still might have a system, but as a definition, these three things should be present in one way or the other.
And is there a threshold, like if you cross like a 3 or a 5 member team, then the documentation has to be thorough, or is it after 10, 12, 20? Is there any pattern?
I think that that will vary from team to team on how teams work. right? But what in my experience, like once you can't fit the team or all the engineers and all the designers involved in the design on the table, then it's the right time to start documenting and writing things down, right? Now, the
Hmm.
size of this table for different organizations might be different. Some people might be able to sustain it till 20, 30 people working like this. But generally, right, beyond that, you should. And it's generally a best practice because right now we're in the lockdown, right? And we are all
Hmm.
thanking ourselves that we did written documentation as well, right? So
Yeah.
anything above 6 people, probably you should write.
Okay. Okay. So before jumping to Asphalt, I would like to just have like a glimpse of how did the name also come about, because I was reading about it and it said like there's a story called Salam, Satu, Aspal,
Yeah.
which if you can tell us what it means, and then how did asphalt as the word come about.
Yeah, so this is really interesting, and I'll have to go into Gojek a bit for this, right? So, Gojek, the name of the company, comes from Indonesian Bahasa Indonesia word ojek, which is just a name for two-wheeler taxis, which were commonly found across Indonesia, right? So, Gojek started as a company with 20 of these drivers as a call center, right? So, these ojek drivers, when they'd go around, when they'd meet each other, they had a greeting, or in Hindi
Hmm.
we'd call it a nara, right? Which went
Hmm.
like Salam, satu, aspal. Aspal literally means the road. So
Hmm.
the English version is asphalt, which we finally chose. And Salam Satu Aspal, roughly translated, means the road unites us all, right? So these ojek
Oh,
drivers, they
nice.
literally make their living on the roads, right? So this is how they greet each other. And coming back to design systems, we were looking for a name, and it just this was a beautiful sentiment, and it fit with what we were trying to do as well, which was we were trying to build a common design language for Gojek does about seven was doing about 17 products then. So
Hmm.
building a common design language that all the engineers and designers understand and speak, it just resonated a lot. So we picked Taspal, the road, and yeah,
Wow,
that's
wow.
that's the story.
Yeah. That's wonderful, like the a really wonderful thought. um yeah, so moving into the deeper questions of asphalt itself, is asphalt based on like the Frost's atomic theory, or are there any such other theories which you have explored? Did you went out looking for more different ways to build it? How did it, like, what's the base underlying base thought behind uh, the asphalt's model?
Sure. So yeah, like we all of us in the team, we've read Brad Frost's Atomic Theory, and Atomic Design is a really good book. And it's not a surprise that this came from Brad Frost and the world of web front end engineering, right? Because web front end engineering has had these practices and theories implemented for a really long time, and
Hmm.
it's very helpful and tackles a lot of difficult problems that lie between design and front end engineering. But other than this, Nathan Curtis, he writes a lot on design systems. His writings in the last 2 years have helped us a lot. Then there is a book from Smashing Magazine called Design Systems by Alla Kolmatova, which helped with the organizing bit. How do we take all these components and how do we better organize them? But these are all things between design and engineering, and that was the easy part, right? The some of the other things that we needed to figure out, which didn't relate to UI or engineering as much, but more to people, were much more harder. Like we will build a system, but how do we continue growing it, right? Front end engineering and engineering in general has had a lot of practices of being able to work with thousands of contributors distributed all around the world, right? And still building systems. Whereas design does not, like, it is neither taught in our colleges, nor you know, nor is it very exciting, right? Because we want to be close to users.
Hmm.
So those parts were more difficult. In On that side of things, there's this book called Thinking in Systems, which really helped, right? So that breaks down from from software design and tech and software and engineering. It takes the problem and talks about it at a very fundamental level, that if you have to design systems, which have a lot of teams, lot of people, right? How do you design the processes so that you know they can build something together and just how do you contain this chaos of building something and releasing it for thousands of people and everybody can make change there as well. So on that side we looked at thinking in systems, and the third source of inspiration was all the design systems already out there. And when I say design systems, I mean in software, as well as on the graphic design branding side of things, right? So we would we looked at a lot of brand designs. There are really complicated brand structures out there. For example, the Olympics brand guidelines which come out, right? That's also a system which a lot of people have to use and be consistent, right? uh,
Hmm.
with So we looked at those as well. And then every design system that any software company has put on the web, we literally audited all of those as well before we started. So yeah, we did hunt for a lot of theories and found a lot as well, and we're
Hmm.
still in the process of finding new theories.
Hmm. Hmm. And so the way we have CSS framework, which you can clearly lift and then start building on top of it, but yeah, it has its own cons of bloating code which is not required for you and stuff like that. But are there systems like these which you can clearly lift from and then build on top of it, or it always has to start from scratch?
There is a lot to lift from, especially like when we started in 2016. From that time to now, there has been a sea change in terms of number of design systems that are publicly available. Uh, Not just the design documentation, but also the code. So for example, on the web side of things, there's Ant design system which a lot of people are using. So right now there are a lot of things literally to build on top of, and a lot of resources out there as well.
Yeah, and then why did you feel the need of building like a design system? Was there a particular, I know like you started off by saying that we had 17 products, but at what point in time, or what was the trigger in the organization that you took this call that it has to be done now and it is like quite mandatory that we have to build this?
Sure. So as I said, when I came to Gojek, there were all of 17 designers, right?
Hmm.
And all 17 designers were working on 17 products, right? And at that time in 2016, all of these products were in the 0 to 1 journey, as product people say, right? So they had really long roadmaps, and we were shipping out features every week for almost all of these products, right? So there was a lot of debt we built in terms of consistency, in terms of behavior as well. So if as a designer you looked at the app in 2016, all these inconsistencies would just jump out at you, right? So
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so as a first instinct, we knew we had to solve this, right? Uh, we knew from design first principles that consistency also makes products easier to use, and we were convinced from the design side that this is not acceptable, right? But then I come from a background in engineering, so I talked to the engineering leads here as well and went through how the architecture of the code was. And I realized that even if we solve it on the design side by say making a style guide or a design component library, that wouldn't guarantee that these issues wouldn't come up later, because this structure, this language needed to exist in code as well, right? And that meant that you know to bring about that much change, it would take a lot of time, time which these 0 to 1 products don't have to spare, right? So the only solution out of this was building a design system, right? How we built it
Hmm.
is, I think we can talk about it later. But
Hmm.
yeah, but it was very clear that we needed this, one to increase the design quality, and other to increase just the you know get speed from somewhere, because it's very difficult to go and tell stakeholders that we will not be shipping features for 3 weeks and we'll be working on this, consolidating everything, and as a result of this you will speed up the rate at which you are able to ship features to the
Hmm.
users. um, so something has to give, right? So we had to figure out a way to make it faster, and yeah, that's generally the start of the design
Correct, correct.
system.
Yeah. So then, can you briefly tell us that how did you build it? I mean, what were the key milestones or checks which gave you confidence that you guys are going in the right direction? Because as you mentioned, you can't go and tell the stakeholders that wait for 2 weeks or whatever we are building this.
Hmm.
So even if you are like collaborating with them on a regular basis, were there any milestones? I mean, what was the process of validating the
Yeah.
components that you're building are modular and scalable for like a host of products?
Yeah. So the first thing was just if everyone is designing their own thing, then just by first principles, it was safe to assume that then this is taking more time than it should, right? Like we already have common flows, components between our products. So, for example, a food delivery app and a grocery delivery app, right? While as products and their user experience, they're the different things, but in terms of components that they use on the interface, there's a lot of overlap. In some cases, there's an 80% overlap. And what we were seeing was that this is still being built separately, right? Because there's no system or mechanism for these people to be able to see, oh, this has already been built before, right? So it was very clear, it was very obvious, but still we did our research, right? We looked at our current speed of shipping, we looked at our current speed at which we were delivering designs, and that felt really slow. And once we knew that this much could be common, we were thinking we could save up to 60-70% of the time, right?
Wow.
So one interesting thing that happened was that somewhere in our branding guidelines we changed the color of our primary gray, which was the color of all the navigation bars in the app. So we changed that color in the design and we send out communication that it needs to be changed in code as well, right? And then one after another, as products change that, and then QAs would find, oh no, the gray here is still different, and then find some other place where the old gray was still there, right? And this took us about 6-7 weeks, right? So there were
Wow.
incidents like this which told you that, hey, we don't just need a design system or style guide on the design side, we need an overall overhaul of how we build design to shipping out features. How we build the product itself, the whole process needs an overhaul, right? So
Hmm.
the way to start this was that the first step was to get engineers buy-in. Not people generally stuck with the topmost stakeholders, the CEOs, etc. But we were not really asking for more people on the team. We knew we can't ask for more time because there are so many things we know we have to build out already. So we started with getting the buy-in of the engineers first, right? And we decided that we will not do it all at once. It's anyways not possible. So we decided to use a product, and the product that we chose was had to be one which is very popular with the users. Second, it had a lot of components, most number of components common with the other products that we had. And the third was that they should be willing to let us redesign, right? So we picked our two-wheeler transportation product, which was Go Ride, and we talked to the engineers, got their buy-in first, and we took the opportunity of the redesign to also build a design system on the side. Right? This, yeah. So that's how we did that. After we did that, the experience was better. It was more consistent. We could see it on our product dashboards as well. The conversions are lower, speed of bookings were faster. So all the typical UX wins were there, but the time win wasn't there. It still took 6 months, right? So, but we knew we had enough common components made that the next product that we pick should be much faster. And then we continued like this for the rest of the 15, 16 products. And slowly we saw speed gain at every product that we went to. Right? I can share more about that later, probably.
No, in fact, that's the follow-up question. So, how big was the team, or is the team that handles Asphalt, and how deeply the front-end guys are involved, or any other department within the engineering is involved in this like a ongoing vertical itself? Because, like, or how big or small the team should be. Actually, the should be for the growing startup can be like a like the next question. But yeah, in case of Asphalt, how big is the team, and uh, like who are the main stakeholders, like the gatekeepers of the design system?
Sure. So now, when we are in the third year, there are about 20 designers on what we call the IXT or Interaction Design team, and there's a similar number of engineers in the UX engineering team who work on Asphalt. And Asphalt is the one that we've shared publicly is for mobile, but there's also an Asphalt for the web. So these 20 UX engineers and 20 designers build it together. Now, to
Yeah.
answer, yeah.
Yeah, 20 is like a big number for like a design system. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So just to give you an idea of scale, I think Mayank had written it in his blog post as well. Before starting with everything, we did a design audit, right? And what we found was more than 1,200 artboards, right? And there are about, I think, 100 or so design tokens that can change. So the scale was huge already. But to start off, and coming to your point of how big a team does a startup need? I think for a startup, two people are enough, as long as one of them is an engineer, right? So
Hmm.
what's more important is not how big the team is. That depends on your product. That depends on the skill of the
But
people involved. But yeah,
hmm, hmm.
yeah.
But the engineering has to be like a full stack developer, because again, like there comes the complexity of being for the and being like developing for Android, iOS, and then mobile web. So how does that work?
Yeah, so I would say one engineer for each platform, right, is
Okay.
what you should have. If you can find a full stack engineer, which generally in startups, that's that's the people they generalists are more easily found. If you can find
Hmm.
one of them, then it'll be easier. But it's safe to assume that most startups will have and one iOS engineer and one Android engineer, if not just an Android engineer. So
Hmm. Hmm.
two people are enough. That's what we started with as well. So on this first test mule product that I told you about, there were two designers and there were two engineers, right? And so that's a good size to start off with. This is not a side project though, by any means. Design systems, you can start them, but you it has to be a dedicated team over time, because building it is the easy part, as we learned in year two and we are learning now.
Hmm.
Maintaining it and evolving it is the harder part, right? So
Correct. Correct. Yeah, yeah, that's true. So before we come to the building and the breathing document side of things, if you can also tell us like what were then the building blocks of Asphalt? So how long did it take to build?
yeah,
And what was the so you briefly mentioned about the strategy going after one product and then expanding it to others.
yeah,
But if you can just deep dive into that and tell us the nuances. Basically, we are trying to build like a design system in BookMyShow as well,
yeah,
and like we are just figuring out where to start from. Like look at the common components,
yes,
look at common screens, or look at common interaction patterns,
sure,
because it's like how do you store your movie database, right? There
yeah,
are a number of axes on which you can dissect your database and then store it.
yeah.
So is there any tried and tested method as to dissect on this axis, and you'll come out with a more robust
Sure.
component library faster?
Sure. So I'll break it down this ways. There are three different aspects, right? Broadly, first aspect is more to do with the brand guideline, right? So the foundational aspect of any UI design are typography, color, iconography, photography, and the grid or the spacing system, right? And
Hmm.
these in at least at Gojek, these come from our brand team, right? That because it's consistent online and offline, right?
Hmm.
So these are what you can consider, as Brad Frost calls it, atoms, right? That's part one. The second part is the components or the molecules, if you will. Uh, so the components are basically what you build with the atoms, things like cells, buttons. In Asphalt, we have cards very prominently, dismissible cards that come in from the bottom. text fields, switches, and what have you, right? Those are the components. Third part is patterns. So, for example, in GoFood, you ask people pick your location, right? So you can pick your location and then you can select it on a map, or you can search for it, or you can just select current location. That whole pattern is the same across GoFood, which delivers food, or GoMart, which delivers groceries, or GoSend, which delivers couriers, or Go Massage, where you're telling your masseuse where your home is. So that is a pattern. Similarly, looking for a location, that's a pattern which a lot of our product use. That's a pattern as well. To start off, I think you should start from the atoms.
Mhm.
If you have, first check that your brand guideline has everything that you need to define these atomic things. Grid and spacing system, you need to choose based on, if your product is primarily web, then it's a lot more work. Mobile is slightly simpler. And photography and iconography and illustrations and colors, right? All of these things need to come from your brand guidelines. So make sure those are in order first. Otherwise, you might need a rebrand, which is a whole another thing altogether. Then you can start putting uh, all the screens together and identifying components. Right? So we spent a lot of
Mhm.
time in categorizing these, right? And
Mhm.
that's where collaborating with engineering helps, because if you show an engineer and a designer uh, a typical app screen, and you ask them, can you describe what the names for these components are, engineers are much more likely to give same answers, right? So I think
Mhm.
that's where collaborating with them helps. They're really good at naming things. So get them together and
Mhm.
audit components with them. And that's what my
Correct.
suggestion would be. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. And then, is micro interactions also a part of design system? Can it be, or there is a separate body who? Because if you go deeper into like what sort of speed the modal window should come in, what sort of a speed the bottom sheet should arrive at,
Yeah.
those are like very nuanced things, right?
Yeah.
So, is does that also form a part of design system?
It is. So motion design, we have again, we didn't tackle this in the first version of Asphalt, but the second version of Asphalt will be out later this year. It's called Aloha, and in Aloha, motion design is also part of the atoms. So the curves and timings of the animations, those can be considered atoms of motion design. Then component level animation, like you click a switch, how does it go to its on state or off state? That would be a component level animation. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, location picker, how does the card come in, how does the map change from a small tile to a complete model. Those things are patterns, so you can fit in motion design in design systems as well. I think material design is probably uh, the best example of that out there. So
Hmm, 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 hmm.
they just launched
And
the
then,
very, yeah.
yeah, because you are the when you are like playing with those beziers and setting sort of a speed to the overall experience,
Yeah.
does it need to also tie back to the brand? I mean, is the same which should reflect in the offline, maybe like other
Yes.
digital areas? How does
Yes.
that collaboration work then?
Yes. So again, as I said, these are atoms. So all the atoms, along with motion design, timing and curves
Okay.
for typography, etc., should be part of your brand guideline. I think it makes more sense if your brand is doing a lot of offline advertisement like we do, right? So, for instance, how the Gojek logo animates, there is a jingle. The animation is set to the jingle's timings. There are very particular curves there. Yes, we would like that to be the same whether you see it in an ad on YouTube or you see it in the app. So, yeah.
Wow, wow, that's interesting. So there's this one more thing which I'm very curious about, and it's generally said that design system is like a breathing document. And so when do you like make it, so initially you need like a ventilator to run it, but then someday, or is it possible even to take out the ventilator? I
Yeah.
mean, there have been also articles recommending that it's not like a side gig, or
Yeah.
like a small side project,
Yeah.
which you spoke about.
Yeah.
So if you can give us like a flavor of what sort of commitment is required, again in Gojek especially was given, and then like a broad view of like for a startup, how would it work?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really hard problem actually, and those all those articles are being written because I think people are realizing that it's really hard. And while building design systems, most teams don't realize this, but keeping evolving it over time is way tougher than building it the first time around. So your design system can the quicker it comes together, it can fall apart faster, right? So to tie it back, you need certain practices and processes. What we've borrowed heavily from is again engineering, right? So what you essentially want is that here is the system, right? And if you want to build something that has already been done before, for example, if you're wondering what is the best way to nudge a user to swipe up somewhere, if somebody has already solved that in transport, then the first thing you need to make sure is that visibility, right? So everything that gets developed, it's documented and it's published. This team needs to, and you can learn that from engineers because they've been doing this for all the open source projects. How do all the users of those great big libraries get to know what has changed, what you can't do anymore, or is there a newer way to do this thing? They do that through engineering practices which have evolved over many years. Designers, I think, have been, we are not used to version control systems. We are not used to how branches work, right? We are not used to how to track all the suggested changes from all the designers, right? And how to conduct reviews. For them periodically so that they can make their way to the system, right? So all these things are really complex, and it took us a fair bit of time to figure these things out. So just to give an example, we were in on, and our design tooling is also not very mature, right? It's only been a few years since you had some sort of a version control in form of abstract or
Yeah, abstract.
yeah, and Figma. But
Hmm.
these tools, like in running a design system for now 20 plus products and also for mobile and web, we've realized we need to build our own tooling, which is where UX engineering comes again. Right. So we figured these things out. For instance, our entire IXT team moved to GitLab. That's where requests can be made, uh, and that's where feedback can be given. So we have one place where we are tracking things. We have tickets now. This can all be really boring as well, but you have to know that this is essential, and you have to know that these are the things you'll have to do. It's not just building it and leaving it there, but you have to train people and make them comfortable with all these processes. But the good news is that once you're familiar with this, yeah, it becomes much easier to manage it. You stop it from falling apart again.
Correct, correct. No, I completely agree because my exposure while I was in ClearTrip, all the designers in ClearTrip used to code, and that's why we used to like we had a static server kind of a thing, like a UI server where we used
Yes.
to put our code, and then once that is integrated with the real data, then we used to again step into the final like the branch which was going to merge with the trunk. So we had some sort of a experience there and understood the power of like understanding code itself. But yeah,
Yeah.
should designers know how to code is a separate audio again session
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah. I
Maybe I
think,
would
yeah.
like to do that with you as well again. But
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think you're correct. And other than, and all these tools, we've built a bunch of them. So, for example, there's a tool called Twin, which the UX engineers built, which makes sure that nobody adds the same icon twice in source code or the same illustration again, right? So, if it finds duplicates, it warns people. There is one more tool. One of the questions people ask me very frequently is, okay, designers follow design system and they make designs. How do you still ensure that it goes out the same as designs in engineering? When the engineers are done with it, we built
Hmm.
it. Our UX engineering team built a tool which takes a screenshot of the designs, a reference screenshot from Sketch, right? And when the engineer is done coding, then it builds the app, takes a screenshot from the app, compares both of them, and if there's a single pixel mismatch, then it fails it on their CI. So they get a build error if there's a pixel mismatch, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it's things like those which you'll have to invest in to keep the system going. Otherwise, yeah, it's really like, otherwise you're good sticking to a style guide. a really good style guide, and then educating rest of the designers in person, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a nice segue to my second last part,
Sure.
which is busting some myths about design system, which is
Mhm.
again like a hot topic which flies around in the
Yeah.
design space. And as you mentioned, that the new icon shouldn't get duplicated,
Yeah.
or like a small variation within the screen also is highlighted. So like let's bust some myths about it. Does design system kill creativity?
No,
I mean,
and yeah.
because we have to work. I mean, from personally, I believe that the more constraints are put, the more creative you become.
Yeah.
So, but if you can highlight, like, does it kill creativity, or what are the boundaries that you have to work with? How constrained they are, or how constrained they shouldn't be?
So yes, the answer to that is an emphatic no. From a philosophical point of view, like you mentioned, right? There is enough research out there, and we know enough from the history of design that constraints actually, boost creativity. Um, Working without constraints, it's a struggle to identify when the work is done, right? So you always, and it's not realistic as well, you always have constraints.
Hmm.
So I really don't think that this affects creativity in any way. In fact, I'll tell you the real reason, why one more reason why we needed a design system to go with. So I've told you about consistency and speed so far, right?
Hmm.
One more problem we had was that we knew that even if everything was consistent and we could build them fast, the app will still not look as good as we wanted it to, right? So this is purely on the atom side of things. We didn't have a typeface that was designed for digital use, right? We didn't have icons which were consistent in the first place. So we knew that we had to do a rebrand, right? And Gojek had matured as a company a lot over 3 years, right? So we knew we had to do a rebrand as well. So we wanted our illustrators and our icon, people who do icons, and our typographers and graphic designers, these guys were all caught up in in so much in shipping features out and supporting the current rate of product development, that these guys had no time to make illustrations on the side, or rework them from the ground up. So one of the requirements, final milestones for Asphalt, was that an illustrator should be able to change the style of illustration without having to talk to a product team or a product designer or an engineer, right? That's how solid our system should be. Or the people working on branding should be able to change the typography style. They should be able to experiment with kerning, leading, layouts, composition without disturbing, the product team's development schedule at all. So I would say, like, we would be, and today we are at a place where my illustrators can choose to design a whole new theme for illustrations for our, all 20 plus products. There are about 450 odd illustrations. They can redesign that, upload it on a website, press a button to publish, and it changes across the app. So in ways like, it enables creativity as well, right? It decouples how the product looks from how it works, uh, from the actual, the flow of the product, or different features and the business rules, basically, right? So I
Hmm.
am a strong believer in it. Like, our creative team wouldn't be creative without a design system.
Hmm. Hmm. True, true. And in fact, there's a nice plug here that
Yeah.
Gojek also has a design, like not a design, but like a go figure. Bulke, there's one podcast which Gojek has, and I believe there's a episode called "Is Design an Art or Science?" So if it's science, then it has to be under limits.
Yes.
Art is, yeah, it's much more subjective and expression driven.
Yeah.
But case of design, you are building for a brief, you're building under a particular uh, context,
Yeah.
so it makes more sense.
Yeah, so by that, just adding to that,
Hmm.
if your creative teams cannot change the photography style, the typography, or in layout and composition, as and when they can or they want to, right? Overall, you can't be productive, right? And that's a team without a design system will find that hard to do, right? So if
Hmm.
you don't separate these things out and you're building one feature, okay, you pair a designer and an engineer together and you ship out this feature, then you can't affect these kind of changes so quickly, right? So
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah, summing it up, our need to be more creative led us to build a design system, right? And within those rectangles that are defined for an illustration view, our illustrators are free to do whatever they want. Because the app is responsive, our UX writers can work as much as they want on their copy, right? And they don't have to create a ticket, and an engineer doesn't have to go and close those story just to change text somewhere.
Hmm. Correct, correct, correct. But this is mainly if it's built with along with the code,
Yes.
right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's a lot of unnecessary work that you're doing.
Yes, a design system which is only used by designers, that's not a design system, right? At all. So yeah,
So, Abhinit, if you can share details or like just give like a briefly some idea of a medium-sized project or like a small any particular case study or success story which help you ship one of the products was very effortlessly. In a
okay,
brief talk, we were talking about like there was a product which was built which was supposed to be like the Netflix of Indonesia. It was shipped in like 2 months,
yeah, yeah,
something like that. Is there any story, inside story which you can share
yeah.
because of design system?
Sure. So as I said earlier, like the first product took us 6 months to build, right? That was
Hmm.
Go Ride. Our second product was Go Send, which as a product problem is quite similar to transport. You have to select a pickup point, a drop off point, and you have to enter some details, and then you see the progress of the order. So when we started in Go Send, we did the designs in a week flat because almost everything in that app was already present in transport, and to develop it, we took about 4 weeks. So in 6 weeks, we were out with that. There
Wow.
was one more similar things with GoFood and GoMart as well. GoFood took us, I think, 4 to 5 months to build. And when we used the same components, which were ready in design and code for GoMart, we could ship it out in, I think, 6 or 7 weeks as well. The most interesting product was a product called Nearby that we had to launch on a really tight deadline. And because the deadline could not be missed, we intentionally built it using the components that were already ready. And that was done end to end design and development in 6 weeks and launched to the users. So
Wow.
the difference was, yeah, the difference was so much that, yeah, uh, yeah, we didn't have to work very hard in convincing everyone this was worthwhile after that.
Correct, correct. In fact, the one thing which I was trying to remember is that we also launched one project in BookMyShow, which was like a loyalty or a Thanksgiving program called a Superstar, and in that like a debriefing setup, I just told that become as lazy as possible so that
Yes.
you don't have to become like do again and again.
Yeah.
So yeah, like
So
lazy here is not in a like a negative sense,
yeah.
but in a sense that you build such stuff at a more fundamental level that then a lot of people can just keep building and you sit back and just like direct maybe.
Yes, and the important thing is like, we are doing this to to get operational efficiency. We are doing this to save time. And what
Hmm,
will the designers do if they save time on on this part of the design process? They'll spend more time close to the users, right?
correct, correct.
So it just like I just think we spend, and also there are other benefits to this as well. For example, Aloha will be the second version of Asphalt, and we will be 100% WCAG compliant this time, right? So this is
Okay.
so we'll
Hmm,
be 100% accessible. Now if
hmm,
you, I don't know about design systems, if you can convince your stakeholders or not, but it's really hard. Even today it's really hard for designers to convince companies to invest time in making their products more accessible, right? And because we
hmm.
could do the design system, right, uh, we now get accessibility for free. So that's just
Wow.
yeah, so there are lots of benefits to figuring out. It is basically melding design and engineering right? And if you do that, you will see great things.
Superb, superb. Cool. I think I'll conclude with one last question, which is like a more hygiene question, which I'm hoping a lot of designers listening to this might be looking forward to. So, how critical is, because you mentioned that you started off with engineers and got their buy-in first,
Yeah.
but how critical is a buy-in from the top management, and how do you go about doing it, or how did in the making of Asphalt, what was the process like?
Sure. So again, like I'm not saying this because I work at Gojek now, but at Gojek, getting buy-in from the stakeholders for this thing was really easy, right? And again, like I think it would be easy anywhere, because what are you offering them and what are you asking them? That's what you have to keep in mind when you go to negotiate anything, right? So what you're asking them for is probably a few more people, right? One or two designers or one or two engineers, and what you're giving them in return is faster shipping, and not just faster. So one of the things that we didn't anticipate early was that if you use reusable components, there'll be less crashes, right? So this
Hmm.
code has already been used before and bugs have been fixed, so there'll be less crashes. So you're giving them faster speed, you're giving them more consistent experience, you're giving them a more robust, non crash prone product, and you're also telling them that it will be easier for you now. Well, if this is done, it will be easier for you to keep the offline and online experience consistent, because now you can go and make changes to the brand guidelines, right, without requiring a 3-month effort from the entire company. So I think, yeah, this should be an easy negotiation for
Hmm.
anyone, right? um,
Hmm.
and yeah,
But
and that's why we are pushing these things out there. You can read our blog post and you can show it to your stakeholders in your company. Some of these numbers are difficult to imagine, but that's reality. That's how.
hmm. No, but then did you like the first cut when you wanted to pitch this idea? Did you had to go along with some sort of a metric as to like we'll change this, and then this will happen, and this will happen, or was it like just building a good credibility as designers, as a design team in the organization?
Yeah.
And I'm asking you because a lot of places the designers are skilled enough, they are great craftsmen, but they lack some sort of a evangelizing mode also, right? Because
Yes.
so like what was the process in pitching this idea, showing them like 100 other companies doing it, or showing them like a real life situation that this will simulating a certain situation and showing them the impact?
Sure. So I think, again, what I started off with was writing a project plan, right? And I wrote all the goals there. Our goal was to make a more consistent experience. Our goal was to reduce the time that it takes for product development, and our goal was to build a product which solves users' problems, right? So product, like we were saying, that we will not stop shipping out features while we do this, right? As part of our pitch, the metrics that we were tracking, main thing was, again, like first thing was number of components being built. That had to be tracked, and by built I mean done in design, done in code, and done in documentation, right? So we started logging all the requests, things that we were building, in one place, and started tracking. Like once we had the whole component structure, we could say 100% done, or 50% done, or 20% done. Second unit to track is percentage of adoption. So how many products right now are using what, like what percentage of their code or their design is from Asphalt, right? So a product can be 30% Asphalt, a product can be 80% Asphalt, right? So that adoption rate was the second thing that we were tracking. And this, Kedar, is really, really hard. This is one place where none of the tools give you any data, right? So
Hmm.
this is all manual work. Our UX engineering has built a tool called Sonar, which can go through code of all the products and tell you exactly what percentage of asphalt things are, and they're doing some exciting things there. But on the design side, this, we still have to build something to report this for us. So,
Hmm.
and the
Very true.
last thing, yeah, and the last thing, which is the dearest to the stakeholders, is how much time did we save, right? So that we were
Hmm.
tracking one by one as we did product redesigns. We were tracking how much time did it actually take from the day the PRD was sent to the day it was launched in alpha. Right? So those are the three things that we tracked.
Wow. This is like really boosted my enthusiasm levels to crack like a good design system,
Sure.
and it hope it helps. Any other concluding thoughts you want to add with respect to Asphalt or building design systems? Any of the, like, you might be getting regular questions from a lot of people about
Yeah.
design system as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So from your like your behalf, I would say definitely go for code.
Yeah.
Is what is like a one takeaway for me. But
Yeah.
any other concluding thoughts on that?
Yeah, like one thing I would like to address is that design. A lot of people are talking about whether you need a design system or you don't need a design system, or how much investment does it take? Is it worth it? Instead of what I would like to suggest, a design system is a solution, right? The problems are how do you free your brand and creative teams to experiment on their own, right, without getting into Jira and into the product development scope. How do you decouple that? Second problem to solve is how do you know the components that you use a lot, how do you get operational efficiency in the process of making that? So how do you speed up things? Um, and the third problem, if you want, I would suggest, is how accessible your app is. Let's tie that problem to design systems as well, right? So
Hmm.
if you care for any of these three, and maybe speed is not a problem for you, right? Maybe consistency or quality is not a problem for you, but at least accessibility would be, right? So for that reason, consider building some kind of a system.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. This WCAG thing is really, really aspirational because I
Yeah,
wonder, like, a company in the developing part of the countries is thinking of accessibility is something really profound and
yeah.
inspirational. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Europe they've already made it illegal, right? And in US people
Mm,
are suing companies because their product was not accessible, right?
mm,
So
mm.
we are not far away from a day when it will be mandatory to make products accessible in rest of the world as well. So it's, yeah, I'm glad it's not a choice anymore.
Great, great. Cool. On that note, thank you, Abhinit, for giving your time and really, really nice talking to you. A lot of food for thought.
Sure.
And yeah. So for the listeners, you can follow Abhinit on Twitter at Abhinitial, ABHINITIAL, and me on @Nimkar Kedar or @AudioGyan. And I don't know what the current position of Corona in the world, but Gojek keeps hiring designers. So visit gojek.io to know more. Any other plug, Abhinit?
Yeah, I have to call out two people's name. One is Mayank Sagar and other is Reza Nuriancha.
Okay.
These are the two people who actually made Asphalt. I'm just a spokesperson, so it wouldn't be possible
Oh,
without their hard work.
okay. A big shout out to both of them. Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, man. Great chat.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Savan, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.